Hey Tribe, today we're going to go over running a little bit about position, how to improve your run, how to improve your gait. That's all setting us up for our April 23rd running workshop that we here have at Primal Path. And if you're not part of it or you can't attend it, we're going to give you a couple of the drills and tips and some of that knowledge so you guys can understand how to improve your run and why it's so important to fix your gait. All right, so first thing we're going to talk about is finding out whether you are a hip dominant or a quad dominant runner. We're going to dive into all of the posture and the feet and all that stuff over a three-part series that we're doing. But let's initially try to establish what type of runner we are, as well as what's going on with the feet, and let's get right into that. So we're going to either be a hip dominant or a quad dominant runner. We want to be hip dominant because we want to push off and through the hip when we are running, versus a quad dominant runner where I'm going to be pulling with that front leg. So we want to be pushing off using that posterior chain rather than pulling. And what we find is that people who are quad dominant have a tendency to overstride, get into that heel striking, or not even heel striking alone, but just very flat foot hitting onto the ground. So a good test to find out whether you are hip dominant or quad dominant is going to be the simple chair test or the bench test we're going to use here. So we're going to set ourselves up, or Nadine's going to set herself up a couple inches away from that bench. And the first thing that we can do is just try to go into a squat. And as you notice, she pushes her hips back, so she is going to be a hip dominant squatter, hip dominant runner in general. Now it's okay for the knees to come forward and touch, but if you are a knee dominant runner, when you go to squat, you're going to be driving the knees in. You're going to see that bench move. Try to use a chair on something on the ground, but you can see that you can't get into that squat because we're driving the knees. Like I said, most likely you're going to be an overstrider. You might have some pain in the knees, might be doing some heel striking and things like that. So what we want to understand is, how do we start training to become a hip dominant runner? And one of the first moves we can do is just make sure we can feel that posterior chain, the backside, the hamstrings and glutes, which are so important in running, but we don't use much just because we don't have the awareness of them. One of the first moves we can do is a pigeon hip extension. So what Nadine's going to do is she's going to get into a pigeon pose the best that we can. And what we're going to focus on is keeping this knee down onto the ground to start. So with this, she's going to make this very mechanical. She is going to fire the glute, so squeeze the glute, and then she's going to extend this leg. So we're going to have those toes tucked, and she's going to pick this up. So now we're getting the hamstring. She's trying to make this heel very long, and then we're going to relax everything. Then we're going to squeeze the glute again. Drive through the toe, extend this heel, feel the hamstring maybe getting into the calf, maybe, and then relax. And we're going to keep on doing that. The goal is that we squeeze that glute nice and hard, then try and extend that leg, feel that entire posterior chain light up, and you can relax, Nadine. So I run through about 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps of that. Take your time, like I said, be very mechanical while you do that. That's going to be the feeling that you want when you are driving through that big toe of that run, that we are pushing through. And when we do that, we should feel that glute fire in the hamstring when we're going to that run. If we are that knee dominant runner, we're going to end up putting that knee down here and almost just going to here before we put that other knee down. So you can never see the legs go behind the body, but we're not powering through the body, and we need to power through those muscles, okay? That's the first exercise we can do to fire up the posterior chain. Second one we're going to do, from Ray Deshary, who wrote Running Rewired. Highly, highly suggest that book. He's got so much information. If you are into learning how to run or rewire your running or get to become a more efficient runner, you need that book. A lot of this information is from him, so we will give credit to all of his ideas and his information as well, mixed with a couple other people. But he's the #1 guy I would highly suggest going to check out. The other one that he came up with, I think he calls it the seascape, but seascape exercise could be called drag and hop, is setting ourselves up to understand how our gait actually works, how we're going to be pushing and pulling while we run. So what's important is finding a line on the ground, and I think you guys can see this little bit of gap, and that's what we're going to use. So initially, she's about 8 inches to 12 inches away. She's going to take one foot and put it in front of the other. The first thing we want to work on is that foot never is going to cross over this line, and we're going to just try and drag that leg straight back behind us. And when we're on this, we should still feel that glute squeeze, and we can kind of even extend that leg a little bit to feel that hamstring. So we're almost trying to get the same muscles that we used in the pigeon hip extension up into this position. When we do that, we're just going to bring it back up and do that same thing. Drag it back, feel the glute squeeze, add a little bit of pressure too into that metatarsal pad, the big pad underneath the big toe, and then reset. And just do that. I would do about 5 to 10 of those on each side to initially just feel what we're going to do. The next step of that is we're going to add in a little bit of the hop. So we're going to keep the feet in this position. They're not going to move at all, but we just want to make sure that we can roll up onto the toes a little bit and just add in a little bit of a hop. Doesn't have to be high, just getting a little bit of a hop. Perfect. Excellent job. Your hop is Canadian. Good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add both of those together. So we're going to do a hop and a drag. It's going to try and make our body feel the way that our legs should be moving when we are pulling ourselves, we're pulling that leg back to fire that posterior chain so we can push off there. Don't get confused with we're trying to pull the body forward. We're trying to just make sure that that leg is coming back so we can push off of it. So she's going to do a hop and a drag. And every time, her back foot is never going to cross this front line. So this back leg should not cross this line when she finishes. Good. And we can go back and forth on those. And that's going to be a good way to fire up that posterior chain, understand how not to overstride so we don't create that heel strike. This is a really good method to start things off, and I would do about 20 reps, do about 3 sets of those to understand what's going on there. So this way we can start firing up that posterior chain to make sure that we're more hip dominant when we're running. We're also going to talk a little bit about the foot, and we're going to use my feet for this one. We're going to talk about the foot, okay? So when we have pronation and supination going on in the foot, okay, and it happens when we run, we're going to impact the ground. That's going to go on the outside of the foot. The foot's going to slowly roll in. We're going to kind of wave back neutral. It's going to come back in again. We're going to drive through this metatarsal pad, and then we are going to push off and through the big toe all the way. That's going to fire all the way up the posterior chain. Now, we want to be able to separate the big toe from the little toes, just like we can separate the thumb from the fingers, that we can switch back and forth into yoga toes. This lets us load this part of the foot separately from this part of the foot. When a lot of us run and we have these collapsed arches and these comfy shoes and our toes are all jammed in socks and shoes, and we've done a couple of videos on that before, and we're going to dive a little bit more into that. What happens is when we do this, we kind of can swap this ankle going back and forth, and we have the entire ankle going back and forth. Now we're going to start using a little bit more of the calf, which we don't want. We want to start isolating all the muscles in the ankle because they are the support. They are what's impacting the ground. That's what's driving us through that run and that technique. So when we are doing yoga toes, which is going to be picking that big toe up, we want to make sure that we have that metatarsal and the heel down. Once we have that big toe up, we're going to switch that up. We're going to push the big toe down. We're going to lift the little toes up. So for some of us, this might be really hard. You might get your fingers going when you're trying to do it and cranking in the shoulders. That's okay. But the big thing is take it nice and slow. If we start off and we start pulling the foot to the side, it's okay. As long as we can get that separation of the big toe and little toes. Then once we feel a little bit more confident, don't try too hard, but stick with that. If you do still have a hard time doing that, a good tip is bringing the big toe down. So we want to push the big toe straight down. So if we pick all the toes up, we can hold the big toe up, relax the little toes. And I want to push the big toe down. I don't want to crunch, because you can see how crunch is going to raise that arch. We don't want that to happen. So we can hold that big toe up, relax the little toes, and think about squishing my finger straight down with the big toe. And then what can happen is we can start, once we do that, applying that pressure, then we can kind of start trying to lift up the little toes. Then we can bring this back up, drive that big toe straight down, lift up those little toes. This is a good little method to help train the feet. Remember, when we're dealing with these small muscles of the foot, we don't want to try too hard, because when we try too hard, we can kind of start creating tension into our body.
So it's going to take focus to be able to really kind of get it down and build also like just the mind muscle connection too, and the strength in the foot. But yeah,
just takes practice. Like I said,
exactly.
Be patient with this one. Like it seems silly, and it might seem that like you have no connection with your foot, which a lot of us don't. But bringing back movement into the foot and being able to use the toes separately is going to help with all the pain that's happening up at the knee, the hip, into the low back. It's going to change our position, the way we're running. If we start doing this posterior chain work while we are practicing, we can get away from the heel strike. We can get away from pulling ourselves forward. We start understanding how to drive and push off. You know, with that foot as well, we do a lot of single leg bounces, right? We do like little single leg hops in class, and some people have a hard time extending their body and pushing up off there. And that's a sign right there that you're going to have pain while running. Like if you think about it, running, we're impacting the ground, and what are we doing? We're pretty much doing a calf raise.
You're doing the same thing pretty much.
Yeah, so if we don't have the strength to be able to hop and land on that toe, on that forefoot, every time you are taking a stride on that run and loading that foot, it's just going to be slapping the ground, collapsing, getting shin splints and knees. So take the time, even if you want to just do here, walk around on your toes for 10 minutes, do some calf raises, stuff like that, to just start building the awareness of your feet, start building the arches up as well, is going to carry you into pain-free running. And that's our goal. 2 more episodes we have. This is part 1. Try those movements out. Let us know what you think. We also have a link to sign up for our workshop in the detail box. As always, like and subscribe somewhere over here. Check out our next video. And we'll see you guys next week.